Hello, hello, and welcome to the show. Now, I say, what do you call a turtle that surfs the dark web? A tortoise. Why should you not use beef stew as your computer password? Well, it's not strong enough. And where did the cybersecurity team go for its team building day? Well, they ransomware. As they say, there's nothing like good comedy, and that was apparently nothing like good comedy. However, the potential power of humor in communication is immense. And if you can make your audience laugh, then the thinking goes that you can make your message stick, because comedy can be like a shortcut that brushes past all of the self-protections and filters that we humans put up around ourselves for whatever reason. Yet, striking a chord with comedy isn't easy. It's a balancing act, some would say, and a backfiring joke can just as easily switch an audience off from your message entirely. So, how can you best employ out-of-the-box strategies like humor to make your cybersecurity messages hit home and stay there? Well, that's what we're talking about here today. And here, as always, is our resident laughingstock, Meta Compliance CEO and author of Cybersecurity Awareness for Dummies. It's Robbie O'Brien. Hello, Robbie.
Hi, David. Good to see you. Well, we all agree that humor is a great way of getting employee attention. The problem is we all have different ideas of what good humor looks like. So I think this is a great subject to get into today.
And I think we can all agree that the three one-liners that I started the show with, while the one-liners may be good, and I've taken those from places where they've got lots of laughs before, sometimes it's all about the delivery. Speaking of good delivery, our special guest today is Executive Director of the National Cybersecurity Alliance, no less, Lisa Plagemeyer. Hello, thank you for joining us, Lisa.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Now, let's name this the National Cybersecurity Alliance. It really doesn't sound like a laughing matter, Lisa. So for anyone who isn't familiar with what it does, what you do, please do fill us in.
So we are actually the founders of Cybersecurity Awareness Month. That's where most people know us from. And we invite everybody to sign up to be a champion every year. We have tons of free stuff out there for people running training and awareness programs. But more broadly, we're about keeping people safe online, especially people like my mom and my 20-something kids. We're really there to try and help the end consumer not be defrauded and be able to use the internet in a way that keeps their data and all the things you can turn into money and things you can turn into money, keeps that all safe.
So it's very much a consumer-facing organization, or do you have a kind of B2B front as well?
I think we're B2B and B2C at the same time with products that kind of cross over between both. So we've got a small business education program that we're revamping shortly. We've got events and sort of educational opportunities and networking opportunities for people in training awareness, for chief security officers and other C-suite executives like CIOs. We get really excited every October. We get to go to NASDAQ market site and usually get a bell ringing ceremony on Times Square with our pictures and our logo up on Times Square. Nice. So we have a lot going on in October, but really all year long, we run campaigns to help people stay safe, whether it's how to be secure while you're traveling, holiday shopping time. We like to talk about romance scams at Valentine's Day to remind people of safe use of dating apps and things like that. So if there's a topic that has a cybersecurity aspect to it or a technology aspect to it, which it seems like everything does these days, then chances are we've got content on our website or we're having a webinar or an event or something that covers it.
Right. And that breadth of audiences that you speak of there, I think that's really interesting, and maybe something we'll touch on about communicating with different types of people in different ways. I think that's something we'll come back to later on. But Robbie, set us up for today's show. Why do you think it is that so much of the cybersecurity awareness training that we've historically created and engaged with, why is it that it simply goes in one ear and comes right out of the other?
So we've all been at it for quite some time now. And despite all the training and awareness that we've done before, every year, every month, every week, we still have to keep bringing people back to trying to get some of their mind share, and that's hard. And I think the subject matter is difficult, and security, information security, tends to be compliance orientated, isn't really cool, isn't really sexy. I think not only this, the organization is in a frenzy of communication with their people. Every manager is communicating their own messages, their top-down messages. And so cybersecurity has to take a ticket, join the line, and get in as well. And I think people are saying, what do you want me to do here? Do you want me to sit all day doing training, or do you want me to do my job? What is it that I have to do? And I think that really is the nub of the matter. It's the challenges, the threats are incessant, never ending, ever increasing. Yet you have this very ethereal thing called human attention. And to get that mind share, to get people to get the light bulb moment is just, it's the gold of the thing. So I believe you have to try everything and anything, and even try and push the envelope, because that's where you're going to get those light bulb moments where people, you might run into some difficulty, and I think we'll talk about that later. But if you stay vanilla, you'll stay ignored.
Yeah. So it's getting that it's getting the time, getting the attention in the first place. And as you say, there's a lot of competition in many organizations with all the other departments, everything else that needs to be communicated down, as well as their day job. And then once you do get that attention, it's making those messages actually stick, actually resonate in some way. That's the other challenge. Lisa, what do you see when you are out and about working with organizations? What do you see all too frequently, perhaps, about the way in which cybersecurity awareness training is or is not sticking with audiences?
So I would actually take it one step further and say that we're just not competing with everything else that's in the company newsletter that week, or everybody else in the organization who's trying to push a message out to employees. We're competing with everything in that person's life for their attention.
Yeah.
Whether it's what they're going to make for dinner that night, or driving their kids to sports practice after school, or what's in the news headlines that day. You're competing for all of it. And I think this is still a shift that older people like me struggle with. I think we have to remind ourselves we're still in the infancy of the information age. And if I think about when I was first starting in my career, it was a lot easier to focus because we just weren't bombarded as much. There was no such thing as digital marketing. There was no such thing as email at work until I was a couple years into my job. So I think because now it's easier and cheaper and more scalable to put information out there, there's just so much hitting us at once, and we're vying for people's attention with everything else. So I think a lot of training and awareness managers do look at okay, where's my article going in the company newsletter, and how's that going to compare to everything else? And can I even get in the newsletter this week? Will corporate comms even let me send anything out? And I think you have to remember that, you're not dealing with a blank slate. You're not sending this message out to somebody who's evaluating all these inputs equally and is sort of giving you equal attention to everything else. You're vying for people's attention. And so I think this onslaught of information that's happened during my lifetime has caused us to, there were stories out a few years ago about the attention span of a goldfish being very short, and that humans don't even have the attention span of a goldfish. I think that's actually a misnomer. I think what's happening is that we are filtering ruthlessly. We are only giving something a few seconds to resonate. If it doesn't hit a chord in us, if we don't immediately want to know more about whatever the thing is, then we move on to something else. because we have so much to choose from, and our brain is looking for the dopamine hit, and it's looking for something really interesting. And so if it's not interesting to you in a couple seconds, you move on. So
Yeah.
I like to quote David Ogilvy to people in training awareness all the time. When you've written your headline, you've spent 70 cents of your advertising dollar. So if you don't get people's attention in a subject line of an email or the headline of an article, you only have a split second to pull them in. And if you miss it in the headline, then the rest of your article or content, whatever it is you've created, can be absolutely brilliant. But if you don't pull them in, if you don't hook them in the beginning, it will never get read. It will never get eyeballs. So I think we tend to have what I call a curse of passion in cybersecurity. We assume that because we care so much about this stuff, that everybody cares about it. And the first CISO that I ever worked for, who recruited me from marketing into cybersecurity, used to tell me about anything I was going to create for training and awareness, or any communications I was sending out. He said, Lisa, you got to start with the premise that nobody cares. Yeah. Just start with that. Nobody cares.
Yes.
And then go from there.
That's excellent. I think that is a baseline for all of us. Actually, takes away any sort of ideas that it's important to people that we're making any progress. I think that never changes, right? Nobody ever cares ever.
There's always, I would say, I'll soften it just a little bit. I would say there's always a portion of your audience that doesn't care. Not everybody is at the same place in their engagement with these topics, right? And there's always going to be a lot of content out there, whether you have like a security portal, an intranet site. There's always information out there for people who do care and want to know more. But I think the people that you need to chase, the eyeballs and the attention that you need to chase, are the people who don't care.
Yes,
because very often they can be the source of the problem.
And then it becomes a challenge to make them care. And that is when a carefully crafted, as a journalist, a carefully crafted headline, a carefully crafted lead and an intro into a story, however you choose to do that, encourages people that, oh, this is a story that I should care about. Actually, I didn't realize, but this is quite relatable to me. That this requires a lot of skill. And your point about the David Ogilvy quote there about 70 cents in your advertising dollar goes on that headline. That is very, very true, I'm sure. But that requires a lot of skill in your comms team. That requires a lot of skill in your, I don't even know what the teams would be necessarily, Robbie. And that's not necessarily a skill that's in abundance, particularly in cybersecurity awareness teams. Those are the people who are in frontline marketing roles who are typically crafting these stories. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, the communication, the engagement of users, providing regular, interesting content is not a natural go-to for the security industry. The natural bent there is technology, scripting, perimeter security. It's the bulk and it's the majority of what the industry does, and I suppose that's why companies like Meta Compliance exist. It's because that's what we do. We provide these content and communication structures for those type of people. But the problem is, even within their boards of directors, even within their peer groups, they still have to constantly get buy-in, not only to their perimeter budgets, but also to get buy-in to why they are putting out these comms, putting out these awareness programs forever, and that's a big challenge.
And that's also why organizations like the National Cybersecurity Alliance, I guess, Lisa, exist in order to help provide ways in which organizations ways to engage different tactics, whether it's hooking it on to Valentine's Day or holidays or whatever. These are all relatable kind of news hooks, calendar hooks, diary hooks that give us another way to tell that story. Now, speaking of telling a story, Lisa. I want you to tell us a story about humor and about your first foray into using humor, exploiting humor, you could say, as a way to encourage people to engage with cybersecurity awareness. How did that go, and what was the circumstances that really brought you there in the first place?
Yeah, I got myself into a little trouble, and I'm getting ready to get myself into a little trouble again, but, there's no such thing as bad publicity. So, as I said, I was working in marketing, and we were doing thought leadership on the topic of cybersecurity. I was in an automotive technology company, and the Jeep hack happened, and that made the 6 o'clock news in the US. And suddenly it was something that all the auto manufacturers and a lot of other third parties in the industry were talking about. So we decided to go out there and do thought leadership around the topic of cybersecurity, because we were a subsidiary of a financial services firm. So we had financial services style security program, a lot more mature than anybody else in our industry. So we figured, that's a nuanced thing. You can't go out and pound your chest and say we're, 100% secure, because there's no such thing. But we figured out a way to do that. So then when that corporate parent spun us off, he said, well, I want you to join the security team full time. And I said, well, I'm a marketing bozo. Like, what am I going to do? And he said, well, I'm going to need help with board presentations and incident communications. We need somebody that can translate between what's happening in the incident and keep the executives updated. A lot of times our incidents involved, unfortunately, customers or other stakeholders. And so we need to get communications out to them. And oh yeah, I want you to run a training and awareness program. And I said, well, what's that? And he said, that stuff that corporate makes us do once a year. And he's like, I want it to be engaging. I want people to actually learn something. And I said, well, nobody learns anything from that stuff. People hate it. Like, I just do it while I'm on a conference call. I just click through it to get it over with. And he said, well, I want your name to be on it. This is the most visible thing that your security team does is run training and awareness. And I said, well, if my name's going to be on it, we're not doing that stuff. It's horrible. And because I started in automotive and was used to dealing with the advertising agencies and a lot of creatives, he said, well, I know a guy who owns a boutique agency in Portland, Oregon, where there's a lot of creative energy and things going on out there, and big agencies that service Nike and Columbia and brands like that. I know a guy there. How about if I give you enough budget and we can do some entertaining videos? So we did that, and we won an award from SANS for our first year out of the gate. And then I went on to do some other video series. We had one called Do Yes or Do No, which was a game show with a game show host named Pavel, who got very upset if you gave the wrong answer to things. And that one is the one that got me into a little trouble, because we were obviously picking at some stereotypes. And we're going to do that again. So we've just filmed a series called Cubicle. If you imagine the word cubicle spelled with all K's and no C's.
I've seen the trailer for this.
Yes, the trailer is out there. We're going to launch the whole series shortly. And basically, if you think about like a show like The Office, that's the setting, except The Office is organized crime. So the characters are all from Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran. And we'll see how that goes. So some people might find it politically incorrect, but like I said, there's no such thing as bad publicity. And the thing is, it's really to get the attention of people that aren't paying attention. So one of the easy buttons to get that attention is with humor. I don't know very many people who don't go through their day looking for something that's going to entertain them and give them a chuckle, whether it's baby videos, cat videos. Everybody's got something they turn to when they're about up to here with their day.
Yes.
And they need a little comic relief. So it's not meant to take the place of serious training. It's meant to just get people's attention and slowly pull them in to learn more as they engage.
Yeah, I think there are 4 or 5 key areas on the internet, certainly, that seem to engage people. And humor and comedy is certainly one of them. Cuteness is another. Being enraged by stuff is no. Then the other 2 we probably don't want to go into here, because this is a family show. But certainly ticking those boxes in terms of humor, absolutely a way to engage lots and lots of people. But and I want to pick up on this with you, Robbie. You mentioned there, Lisa, about how comedy can be subjective, and what might have me you lolling and ruffling on the floor might be instead met by some audience members with a stony silence, or maybe even cause them offense. So, Robbie, what kind of battle scars, because you've also been down this line as well with it, with terms of creating emotionally intense or certainly comedy type content, what battle scars do you have of trying to toe this comedy fine line?
Well, about 3 years ago, I was inspired by a book that's available in the UK, and I've seen it in other countries, in Brazil, for example. And they took it was a brand that was like a child's teaching book to learn kids to read, and it was called the Ladybird Book of something. And so here's one here. I know that some people are listening to this. It's a guy out in the ledge, and somebody's trying to coax him in, and this is called The Hangover. Yeah. So, and it basically is it actually was a book. It wasn't called The Hangover, but they take the pictures and they add different ones. Here's one here called The Husband. Yes, and there's a one inside which is a lovely picture of somebody getting married, and it says it's important for the husband to pretend that he had no life before he was married, especially if he was married before he was married. So it's that sort of humor, right? So it was like a tongue in the cheek, just off kilter humor, and we thought, who could that everybody would love that, right? So we came up with a brand new series called Cybersecurity for Grown-ups. That was our take on it. And it was, basically, John joins the organization. He's so excited. He's left his job as a barista. John sends out, transfers the money to hackers. John no longer has his job in the company. He's happy being a barista before. So that was really and it's humorous. There was a group of us that thought it was great, and that same group couldn't understand why a group of the company, people in the company, were upset about it and saying, no, we can't do that because you're going to offend baristas. So I didn't know that was a particular group that was protected, but seemingly it is. And you can see I was on the other side. And this became a big issue because we couldn't move forward even though we had the content. So what we did is we went out and commissioned a very well-known opinion survey, and we did 1,500 people on the use of humor within engaging employees in this area. And guess what? I was very happy because it bore out. It's great when you get actual research that bears out your bias, and it did. And it said that 10% of people basically, I'm paraphrasing, don't have a sense of humor. There's 10% of people who didn't feel that humor had any place in cybersecurity education, and that's fair enough, right? But there was 90% of people who thought it was fantastic. They thought, and all the high notes, they would welcome more of it. They would like to learn that way, and so on, as you would imagine. And that became a problem because now we had the evidence, but we still couldn't move forward because CISOs are in a difficult scenario whereby, say they did put out something that was amusing. The problem then is you get a number of complaints, and then we're into now behavioral science where you have the vocal minority, and the majority goes, yeah, this is just too difficult. Listen, let's just close it all. Let's close it down. And I can't listen to them, type of thing. And that's that issue, which is really a problem because you've got this self-defeating loop where you actually can't get the engagement happening. And I think what we did at the end is the way out of it was we created a access to this content, and we had viewer discretion advised. It was like as if it was something salacious behind the button. And guess what? It's our most clicked button on the entire platform ever. I mean, people go and say, "What's that? I'll have some of that." Click, and in they go. And it is funny, and it allowed us now really to say, well, we told you shouldn't have come in here, and you can't be complaining. And it really was a big shock for me personally because I passionately believe that the threats to people's personal life, secret life, corporate life that cybersecurity represents means that there is almost a vicarious liability on the organization to go beyond the vanilla. You know, at the minute, tick box is not good enough. I think in the future, let's call it traditional excuses why you don't do it won't be good enough. And the cost of it is so overwhelming that you have to go further. And I think we're on a journey, and I think we'll look back in 5-6 years time and go, do you remember we couldn't do that? And now it's like, do whatever you can to get the job done.
Yeah, I love that button, that viewer discretion advised button. It's an ingenious workaround, and like you say, if you click that button, you waive your right to make a complaint when you go through the other side. But also, people kind of feel a little bit naughty, a little bit adventurous as they go behind there, and are more likely to engage with the content there as well, as though they're kind of like peeking behind a curtain. Lisa, surely you faced some pushback as well with the content, and you mentioned one particular complaint. How easy have you found it to create the equivalents of those viewer discretion advised buttons and encourage people who might otherwise be on the conservative side? Because let's face it, particularly when we're dealing in corporate land, there is a lot of conservative with a lowercase c in there. How do you push back on the pushbacks?
Well, I think, first of all, we're going to add that viewer discretion to the Cubicle series before we put it out. That's necessary, so we should do that.
You're welcome.
Yes, thank you. I think you have to realize that you also have advocates. You have the silent majority that we've talked about, right? And so how do you mobilize those advocates so that you have more of a sense of reasonableness in the organization? And so that was one of the things that we did when I was treading into hot water with our campaign with our Eastern European game show host. He was actually, he had a name, Pavel Dragunov, I think we called him. And he was from Ukraine. So we made up a fictional country that he was from. And he just had this generic Eastern European accent, also fictional, completely made up. And I think reminding people that this is fiction and it's meant to be humorous, we're not, taking a shot at any one nationality. That was something that we tried to remind people as well. I think, well, truth be told, I did a little OSINT on the person that was complaining the most loudly. And there were also some other issues with that person in the organization and their opinion not being super popular, and coming in late every morning and complaining that his favorite flavor of bagels were already gone, things like that. Some people just really like to call out the negative in life, and that's kind of who this person was. And so once we kind of realized, like, we could do something absolutely brilliant that nobody else would find offensive, but this one person is still going to have a problem with it. And we had that conversation with HR, and we were able to move forward. There was a point in that campaign where HR said, no, you've got to stop. And we knew, and my chief security officer, in a very pointed tone, said to them, do you want to be responsible for the security of this organization? Because the next time we have an incident, we can tell them to call HR. And that was the end of that conversation. But this was a very outspoken CISO who is a dear friend to this day. But when they realized, just like you said, how much was at stake, and that this wasn't just another corporate communications campaign, that this was something that that we were doing because there was too much at stake. So we were being edgy on purpose. On a previous campaign with the same corporate communications department, we had been told that we had banners for the company intranet site and for our email communications that didn't say a word about security. They were just there to pull you in. They were a little bit humorous. They were intriguing. And that was the idea. That was our hook. And we were told, no, you need clarity of message. These need to say, click here to learn how to protect the company, instead of just like, click here to learn more, or a button that just said, watch the video. And we pushed back on that hard and said, what about the people who don't care about protecting this organization? Because there's plenty of them. There's plenty of them in every organization. That's not what people walk around with at top of mind every day. We said, those are the people that we're trying to get to. If you care about protecting this organization, then there's other ways for you to get to our content. And those are plentiful. But how do we get the attention of the people who don't care, the people who aren't paying attention? If we say that this is about security at the outset and they don't care about security, they're never going to click through. So so that was another argument that he thought was worth having, and that we eventually prevailed on so that we could get the information out there. And one of our first videos in that campaign, I think on the first day, it got 1,300 views.
Yeah.
There was a video that was put out by the CEO of the company that was just a very conservative with a small c, typical video of him sitting at his desk, making an announcement about something, and it had 25 views and ours had 1,300.
Yeah.
So that told us what people would rather watch.
One of the things that we found as well that we tell customers is, if you're going to use the humorous stuff, go and get buy-in from the senior guys and call it out. We expect that there's some people that are going to have a problem with this. What do you think? And typically, let's say, we don't care, we'll suck it up. We'll deal with that when we come to it, because that means that when HR does push back or someone does have a vocal minority, you can say, well, listen, we've already cleared that. The executive level have set the tone, and they're prepared to see this through on the basis of the payback we're getting from the levels of engagement. Then what happens, as Lisa said, you get these outrageous levels of engagement, typically double what you would have got on your normal bland stuff, and it justifies the approach.
We actually gave the executives a talk track. We loaded their lips. We're like, this is comedy, this is fiction. We made sure that everybody knew that if they did get any pushback, they kind of had the right words to say on the tip of their tongue.
Smart moves. Let's just take a little bit of a step back, perhaps, and understand what ultimately it is that we're doing and why it works when we're employing comedy here. So there are lots of different types of comedy. One of them that treads that path of potential offense is innuendo. And Lisa, the internet tells me you've been doing a lot of talking about cybersecurity BS recently. That sounds quite offensive. What are you actually talking about, though?
Behavioral science. The BS
that's
is
the BS.
In parentheses, behavioral science. Yeah, I that's a talk I give to a lot of organizations, to their employees. Gave it last October, giving it this October. And it involves some audience polling where we ask employees of different organizations some of the same questions that we ask in a report we call Oh Behave, which takes a behavioral science view to cybersecurity. But yeah, we have some organizations, we have a less edgy title because some organizations don't want to use that title, but it drives attendance. People are curious. They see something like that that's a little edgy, a little bit funny. And I believe we get more attendees because we use that title. Again, it's the David Ogilvy quote, right? The title's got to be good or people won't attend the session.
And in terms of the behavioral science angle on what it is we're doing when we're employing comedy here, you can either, there's lots of different approaches you can take to communications, but there's that authority principle, isn't there? When you can tell somebody, you shall do this, you must do this. And I think, as we've explored right at the beginning of today's show, that doesn't always work. That rarely works. If you tell somebody, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink it, for example. So what you're doing is finding these nudges and finding other ways to lead people along this line, other ways in which people might choose to engage with the content, with the message that you're trying to embed, to implant within them.
Yeah, and as Robbie said earlier about, security professionals and what we're used to spending our time on, and then the responsibilities that we have, we're not always good at influence. So to your point about using the principle of authority, the because I said so reason, I once taught a class, a certification class for training and awareness professionals. And one of the assignments I had was we were covering Dr. Cialdini's principles of persuasion, and that principle of authority is one of those. And I said, okay, here's a topic. I think we took an FBI bulletin from the States. And I said, you're going to write an article about this threat you want people to know about within your organization. So what is your headline going to be, and what principle are you going to use to communicate it? Pick one of Dr. Cialdini's principles. And 9 out of 10 people in the class picked the principle of authority.
Right.
And so every time I taught it after that, I had to say nobody's allowed to use the principle of authority, because it kind of, I think it's a poor excuse for a lack of creativity. Just saying do this because I said so. Nobody likes to hear that in life, whether it's from your parents or your teachers when you're young, or anybody else in your life as you get older. There are more nuanced and creative ways to influence people than the principle of authority. But I think it's something that we, particularly if we work in GRC, we have a compliance mindset. Like that's what we tend toward, is like, this is just the right thing to do. And you've got to do this, and there's no two ways about it. And human beings don't always respond so well to that.
So I think that there's probably two other things I would add. Number one, I think there's a difference between Europe and the employment laws here are such that you have to tell people in a policy, you have to lay it strictly out, because otherwise, again, if anything goes wrong and you want to move forward, you have to, there is a reason for HR to cover themselves. So here, what you almost have to do is run a parallel scenario where you have engaging stuff running alongside fairly boring stuff, and I think the key there is maybe get a rhythm where people will it will swallow the broccoli at the same time as they're eating the ice cream. That type of approach. That's not a really good analogy. It's probably humor, but it's like that.
No, I agree with that completely. I mean, in a lot of industries in the U.S., you have strict compliance. I mean, you have to do those things. Like I would never say that you don't, but it's not the only tool in your tool belt to communicate that way.
The other thing is, people appreciate the effort. Like they know that we've all sat through corporate training forever, right? But when you give them something that's different, a bit fresh, they sort of, their brain lights up and they turn themselves on, and they appreciate the fact that the organization's making the effort. And I think that's something that is often overlooked, because I don't think there's anyone anymore can say they're not aware of the threats of cybersecurity. It's pervasive in our society now. It's when you come to the workplace, the vast majority of people expect it to be now part of the diet that they receive. And if the organization brands it to their unique voice or their unique approach, if they have engaging aspects to it that help people move along, I think people appreciate that and respond really well.
Before we wrap things up for today, final pieces of advice or final thoughts about when it comes to being creative with comedy and humor in cyber awareness communications. Robbie, final thoughts.
Be bold. It's easy to say, but
it's easy for you to say, especially.
Well, it isn't easy for me to say. I have lots of review committees that sort of I now believe exist to throttle the expressions and the idea of engagement that I have. Plus, I'm Irish, and as you know, the filter is continually on, so this is not how I normally speak. But
there'd be a lot of bleeping otherwise.
and we wouldn't get anything done. So I think it is be bold, because the attackers have the advantage. That's the reality. They have the advantage, and expecting that this will happen by sort of some sort of symbiotic movement is naive. So that's my advice: is take risks and ask for forgiveness.
Be bold, because the bad guys can be bold, and
yes,
judging by the junk mail, they frequently are bold with their headlines. To come back to that David Ogilvy point, Lisa,
I would say that if it doesn't come naturally to you to be creative, if you're not gifted on that side of your brain, or to write stuff that's comedic, to sort of naturally be entertaining in your security communications, hire it. Don't pressure yourself to try and do something that's not in your skill set. There's plenty of freelancers out there. There's lots of comedy writers that struggle to make a living and would love to work on a project for you. So I would say, whether it's a contractor or a freelancer, there's lots of sites out there where you can hire people around the globe, like Upwork and things like that, where you can find a contractor for a short-term project. They don't have to know a thing about cybersecurity to write something entertaining about cybersecurity. You can tell them enough that they can produce good content. So don't pressure yourself. And I would also say hire a professional, because to me, there's nothing worse than comedy that doesn't quite make it over the finish line. That's not quite funny. That can be really awkward. So I'm an advocate for reaching out to creatives to do the job, and they're generally undervalued, and it won't break your budget to hire a comedy writer to work on a project with you.
So don't use ChatGPT to write your comedy.
I've never tried. I'd honestly be afraid of what it would come back with.
I think there's lots of writers who would agree that they're undervalued at the moment, the majority of whom at the time of recording are still on strike, I believe, and may well be very, very grateful for some non-film based work.
For a side hustle.
Exactly. Listen, we'll leave it there for now. Lisa, it's been absolutely amazing to have you on the show today. Thank you so much for joining us. Where can people find out more about the kind of work that you get up to? And hey, maybe tune into some of the amazing cubicle-shaped content you've got coming out in the future.
If you go to staysafeonline.org, you can sign up for our newsletter. If you have any questions about our organization or want to collaborate with us on anything, there's a contact us form as well. But staysafeonline.org.
Super stuff. And Robbie, for all of the true to life drama that you've written into Cyber Police, the next season of which is, well, kind of out anytime now. Are there any comedic moments in there, or is it just all high intensity emotion stuff?
Look, there's a few light moments. We've a really talented hacker who likes to poke fun at the cyber police when she gets a chance. Running a scam where she gets one of the police guys to sell a bike. He's selling his bike online, and he basically takes his bike and takes his money. So yeah, we tried to inject humor where it is appropriate.
And for anyone who hasn't tuned into it yet, Cyber Police is Metacompliance's Netflix-style cyber awareness miniseries. First season dropped early in 2023, and second season is out there any moment now, if it's not already. Listen, thank you both for joining us. Thank you, Lisa. Really good to chat. And thank you, Robbie, too. And thank you all for joining us. We'll see you next time. But for now, bye-bye.